Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are and wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, a creative content writer here in Chesterfield. I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. I'm always excited to record the podcast, and it doesn't matter the topic, doesn't matter the guest. I'm always excited. I don't know if I've been as excited to record the show as I am today in a long time, because I have always been such a huge fan, a huge nerd about the Apollo missions and NASA and things of that nature. And we have one of Chesterfield's own, a Chesterfield native, a graduate of Chesterfield schools, somebody who went and did and impacted those missions on a significant level. And I'm really, really glad to be able to bring him to the podcast and to have to be able to talk about so much of that. Not just American history, but because of his connection, Chesterfield history. James Jackson, a former NASA engineer, 4 decades there. Mr. Jackson, welcome to the podcast, sir. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Brad?
I am doing very well, so appreciate the time. Appreciate you coming on the show. Obviously, you were back in town a couple months ago for the Bravo Awards, and I really appreciate you being willing to do this now, to talk a little bit about that and your experiences at NASA. And I guess the place I always like to start with folks is to sort of do an introduction, right? Is to get people who are listening or watching the show to sort of understand who it is they're talking to. But in your case, your background is the story, right? That is the reason why we are here, so to speak. So I kind of want to flesh out your intro into almost like a background, a supersized background, if you will. So Mr. Jackson, you come to this program in part because of your Bravo Award win from the Chesterfield Education Foundation in November, which according to the foundation, quote, recognizes outstanding professional and community achievements of Chesterfield alumni. But I guess as we get back into sort of the way back of your history, a 1961 graduate of Carver in Chester, growing up in Chesterfield, could you ever have imagined not just that you'd do a lot of the things that you've done in your NASA career and in your life, but that you'd be on a podcast with me today? No, obviously I'm kidding. In general, though, what was it like growing up in Chesterfield in that time? And what was it like to go to high school and to kind of go through adolescence and the sort of young person's experience at such a tumultuous sort of time in our nation's history?
Yes, Brad. Thank you for having me. Thank God for allowing me to do this and in my 80th year here.
There you go.
It's been a long road. It's been bumpy. I've had some successes, and I'm glad to share them with people. I was born in 1942 in Winter Park, Virginia, to John and Mary Jackson. I was the second of many children. I'll mention them later. But my older brother was 11 years older than I was when I was born. Mm-hmm. I understand there had been a stillbirth in between. Uh-huh. So I think my mother was excited that this pregnancy had been successful for her.
Right.
I am followed by 8 siblings.
Wow.
We've lost two brothers along the way. Mm. I went to Winter Park Elementary School. My birthday was in late October, so I had to wait a year to enter. So I was in my 7th year before I entered. Winter Park Elementary School at the time was a consolidation of 3 or 4 wood frame buildings that preceded it in Winter Park and Moseley, Virginia.
Right.
I entered Winter Park the 2nd year of that brick building existence. And then moved from there to Carver High School, George Washington Carver in Chester, which was a consolidation of Hickory Hill and school in Mentorica.
Okay.
Consolidated. And now these were during the days of segregation. So there was only one school for Negroes, blacks, or people of color. In my community, I was a member of the 4-H Club, and that's where I learned a lot about life. 4-H Club helped prepare me for things to come. I've been able to do a lot of self-maintenance myself because of things I learned through the 4-H Club. 4-H Club, for those who don't know, that's the Heads, Heart, Hand Club. We didn't have Boy Scouts in my area, so it was a very important factor. My church was also a big factor, the community. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior around 12 years old. Somewhere around the time I was 4 or 5, my dad was ordained, had a kind of like a Paul on the road to Damascus experience in the woods with the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
And the family lifestyle changed around that time. So there weren't a lot of the usual social activities going on in and out of my house. Much of our activity was centered around his work, his involvement with churches, and a little farm to support the family, and the 4-H Club for me, and garden clubs for some other people.
Right.
Baseball was very important to me. We had a version, we call it stick ball. So we had a version you could play by yourself. You just go out and hit rocks. And you pitched to one another and had challenges. But the Winter Park baseball team, later called the Chesterfield Braves.
There you go.
Was prominent in my getting out from the community into other communities and doing things that were of interest to me.
Right.
Didn't have television until I was in the 10th grade.
Right.
Radio was our primary means of getting reports and things, later newspapers. Let's see, what else can I say? I played, going on to Carver, I lettered in baseball and basketball. 1 year in basketball, 4 years in baseball. I was co-captain of the team that won the Virginia State Championship in our category, playing at Virginia State College at the time, now university.
Right. Yeah. And then, and I guess too, as you're growing up and you're doing all these different kinds of things, I can imagine as a kid you had to at least have some semblance of an idea that these kinds of things kind of either came easily to you or that you enjoyed them. As you look back on those kind of formative years of your life, did you have an inkling at the time that you could do something with math, with science, with these types of subjects that goes well beyond the borders of Chesterfield County? Like, did you have an idea at the time that you could that would be maybe where your future would be taking you?
Things started to click in place around the 9th grade in high school. I had 2 math teachers who recognized my capabilities in math, and they encouraged me to change from a general curriculum to a college preparatory curriculum. And my mother got wind of that, and the influence of those teachers and the prompting of my mother kind of directed me or guided me toward college,
right?
Thinking about college. So I made a mid-course correction in the 10th grade.
Okay.
The impact of that, since I had planned to take business, speech, and typing, things that I felt earlier would be beneficial to me later in life, in taking those classes, I didn't get to take high school physics. So that turned out to be kind of a limiting factor along the way. I had to struggle and make up for that, but I made it. I didn't have mentors beyond the 4-H Club County agents and the teachers. So I didn't have a concept of engineering, and my concept of engineering would be somebody who operated the train. I didn't have models of color. I knew one black dentist as I was graduating from high school. So I think I recall putting in my yearbook maybe some aspect of government service. Now, it's interesting, along the way when the USSR put up Sputnik, my dad and I had a conversation, and I remember his telling me that he didn't think God intended for men to go up in space beyond air flight. And, I think about that later on. 6 years after leaving college, after leaving home from high school,
right,
I was with NASA,
Yeah, there you are.
embarking on putting men in space.
Right.
So we never had a follow-up conversation on that, but the family was generally accepting and exciting of my working with NASA and the reports they got back. They spread it to the community, we've all benefited from that.
Yeah.
I think in college I considered being a pilot, and along the way I had to start wearing glasses, and then I kind of freaked off that maybe I'll be a navigator.
There you go.
So I never envisioned being with NASA. In fact, NASA came about in 1959, midway of high school.
Right.
NASA was not on my radar.
Yeah. And apparently, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, just the idea of, sometimes, you might not have a plan for something, but something has a plan for you. 43 years, right? That you were with NASA, coming out of Virginia Union, where you were valedictorian. You had a master's in mathematics from Howard. You spent a year in Nigeria, which I want to come back to in a minute. But I know that during your time with NASA, you did a lot of, what from the outside looking in would seem to just be monumental sort of historic things. And you check me on this if I'm incorrect here. My understanding is that you either wrote the algorithm itself or helped to write the algorithm. You were involved in the writing of the algorithm, which helped to verify NASA's capability to navigate from Earth a lunar landing between two craters on the moon. I can't imagine as a kid ever thinking, because look, I'm a little younger than you, right? I was born in 81. I lived the entire world I've lived in. Man had stepped foot on the moon. But for those folks who had not lived in that world, I can't imagine as a kid, what 8-year-old James Jackson would have thought if you told him that someday you're going to help a bunch of people put other people in a metal thing, and they're going to send that person to the moon. And that person is going to land, and they're going to take some steps. Just the seismic nature of it all is just it's hard for me to wrap my mind around. I can't imagine what it would have been like for you. As you look back on those years, what really stands out to you the most? Was it being part of that team? Was it the scientific achievements of the group? The way that as a very large sort of, for lack of a description, family, NASA was able to achieve so much. What really stands out to you about those years that you worked in the Apollo program?
I've been reflecting on that situation. This is the answer I give. Even with the menial jobs that I had as a boy growing up, if I had a job, in fact, my first job locally as an 8th or 9th grader was $1 a day working in the field on a farm. Huh. I worked on 2 farms for the Vest family of Chesterfield.
Okay.
And if I mention names and people hear that, I'd like to hear back from them.
Okay.
But every task I was given, I tried to understand what needed to be done and to do it well. And if I observed that I could improve on that, I made a note of it. So on the farm, I was at Adventure Hill Day riding camp, handling the horses for the girls to come out to ride. I worked road construction with the Cashin family. And by the way, the Adventure Hill was with the Hankins. Road construction with the Cashins and John Tabb, sawmill and logging. Each of those tasks gave me a chance to learn something, and I tried to take something away from it. So when I got to NASA and they gave me the title of mathematician data analyst, there was a bunch of people NASA was trying to get together to support the mission to the moon and to be successful, because we were in a space race with the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. And it was very serious effort. So when my supervisor made assignments for me, I just look at them as the assignments that I had as a boy and tried to do them well.
Right.
Along the way, these assignments that I accomplished at NASA were just like those that I had as a boy. The things you were told to do. Some cases no one had done it them before. But you put together your academic training, your practical experiences, the things that you learn along the way, even in baseball. Some of those efforts positioned me to be where other people could be called upon to help me. It was only after I retired that at my retirement function, a group of my associates from like day one to day beyond their time at NASA to my end testified, and they elaborated on some of these developments. One was the involvement of helping NASA determine whether we could land between two craters. Now, the significance of that is that the lunar module was on a tripod. So if you landed in a spot where the thing would lean, it would tip over and it couldn't get up.
Right.
So we didn't have GPS back in those days. It was like our capability was, let's say you are in Chester now, and our best determination of going up and coming down in Chester, we could say with confidence that we could get you in Chesterfield, but not Chester.
Yeah, it's a little different.
I was on the team. We had people from Johnson Space Center responsible for manned flight, Kennedy Space Center responsible for the launches, and Goddard is the communications center for all of NASA, Goddard and Greenbelt. But we were back up to both Houston and Kennedy for manned space flight activities. So we were part of a working group. So nobody could, we put our best information together, and we said, well, we got to go back and make an improvement on the equipment that takes the measurements of metrics, like angles for direction to the spacecraft, distance to the spacecraft, how the spacecraft is changing with respect to time. And there was something was lacking. So the engineers put a mod in to give us accuracy. But we lack a tool for quantifying how much accuracy there was.
Mm-hmm.
So my supervisor said, okay, go to the library, research, find out how we might make this data that we now have more usable to us.
Right.
Like one number. We had millions of pieces of information coming in, but we need to boil it down to one number. So they would take that number and put it in their software.
Right.
And when I did my research, I call it the equivalence of a master's degree thesis. With the supervision and support of my colleagues, we came up with an algorithm to take that data and to summarize thousands of pieces of data into one number. And we gave that number to the orbit determination people, and they put it in their programs around the country, and everything just fell together. And now the engineers and the managers could go back and tell the scientists that we now can navigate a spacecraft from Earth to land on the moon between your prescribed craters.
Right.
So that was just like the farmer telling me to go hold one of the two stalks of corn growing up because one would interfere with the other. He told me what to do. I did it. I was able to come up with this algorithm. Now, the algorithm is like a big box. Well, it's like a box with some summations,
Mm-hmm.
some multiplications, some divisions, some factorials, some square roots. Those are the things that process the data that went into the box.
Right.
And out of the box comes just one number, which we call something like, we call it the noise.
Mm.
An indication of the random error resulting from the equipment making the measurements.
Gotcha.
So that was like routine. It was just like the farmer telling me to go chop the corn.
Mm-hmm.
It
That's an
worked
interesting
out.
way to look at it. Yeah.
And it was only when my colleagues came back from the other areas and they told me the impact. They told not just me, but the entire retirement function attendees that's what it all meant. So it's like not going back to the farmer and said, I had a good crop that year because it worked out. And an example of that, as a 6-year-old, I went into the elementary school to play ball with the 6th and 7th grade boys. Our elementary was 1 through 7. So I noticed that they would hit the ball in certain ways. Each player had a different characteristic. And I would learn that, and I would take advantage of it along the way. And other people observed that I was successful in doing those things. So whenever they needed my kind of help, they would come to me, or they would pick me to be on that team. So that's kind of a summary of it. Along the way, my involvement with softball and camping and things like that put me in good stead with my colleagues. Even though I was a minority, there was an earned and a deserved respect and camaraderie among not just we employees, but among our families. I was able to move up the chain from technical to management, supervisor, and then later on to do some other things.
Yeah. What did it mean to you, and does it mean to you to not only have been a part of this, but to, as you mentioned, to be, a minority, to be an African-American man, to be a part of this, making such huge contributions to science, society, our country. As you look back on it, what does it mean to you to have been able to be in that position and to have had the role that you had throughout?
Well, it's becoming to mean more to me now, and looking back and hearing other people talk about the impact that not just what I did, but where I went, who I was involved with, the programs that I was associated with. There are thousands of men and women doing things like I'm talking about here, but we don't get a chance to hear about them. I'm laughing because I'm 80 years old now, and it's just bubbling up to the point that I'm hearing it back from 2 generations in my community of what it means for James Jackson from Winter Park, a family that had no precedent in college, from a community that for at least one generation had no one go to college. And now he comes back and he shares his story. We share our story with him and tell him what impressions he had on us. And that's where it's it's beginning to tickle, my fingers, because along the way it was just like working on the farm, working in construction, working in the woods. It was routine, just trying to do the best that I could do, to know the rules of engagement, to give it your best.
Yeah. I've got 2 questions I want to I want to make sure I hit. First, I want to ask you a little bit about, you spent your junior year at Union, you spent abroad in Nigeria. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I know you also played a role toward the latter part of your career. You were the center's kind of contact for their program with historically black colleges and universities. And I know that you were, that obviously, considering your experiences and everything, I just want to get sort of your point of view on, as somebody who grew up in, your high school was segregated. You spent that year in Africa. You lived the experience you lived, and then to have that sort of role where you're reporting, not just to NASA, but also to the president, to the White House, as you work with those HBCUs. I'm just curious, as you look back on that, what really stands out to you about that portion of your career?
Well, the first thing, deciding to go to Africa was against the norm. Mm-hmm. I cannot rationalize today how I made that decision, except that a former Professor from Virginia Union was in another organization, the American Baptist Convention, and that organization was starting a junior year abroad program. So he reached back to Union and said, you have any students that want to go? And I think 9 students signed up to go abroad. Another fellow named Barry Smith and I signed up, and we were assigned to go to Nigeria. Now, Virginia Union had some African students, so African students were not a foreign matter to me. But I had never been away from home except 4 nights at Virginia State College as part of a Forage Club program at the age of 13, but just before high school. But anyway, it was my opportunity to go abroad. And apart from our men who were in military service, it was probably unprecedented in my community. I got a chance to spend a week in London, a week in Paris on the way over. Ibadan, Nigeria is on the west coast of Africa. 63 is the year I was there. It was the year Kennedy was assassinated. So I experienced that trauma abroad. It gave me there. I studied physics, chemistry, and math all year, and no light courses. There were several Americans at the university. We recruited some Nigerians, and we organized a club level basketball team to play against teams from the American Peace Corps that was stationed in Nigeria and native Nigerians. Later on, when I was married and had a child, 6 years old, she said, "Dad, I want to play soccer." Well, I said, "Oh boy, I didn't learn how to play soccer when I was in there." But going abroad for 9 months, so there was no coming home for 9 months. Communication was good. We made friendships with some American families there. I was apprehensive as to whether I would be able to graduate on time, but I was able to take enough classes during the summer to be in position to graduate from Virginia Union. Mm-hmm. So having missed my junior year, I wasn't that well known on campus, except in small circles like softball. I was on the Honor Society. I made the Honor Society and was sent to Southern University in Baton Rouge. I was part of the Religious Society. Virginia Union has a seminary. And I kind of would hang with the boys who were in the pre-seminary more so than some of the larger social circles. So I had a limited visibility, and it was perhaps a surprise to just about everybody that I was valedictorian. And the interesting thing about that is that I was salutatorian at Carver to a young lady by fractions of a point. We both went to the same university, and we flipped it, and the difference was fractions of a point. So I tell students when I tutor them or meet with them, fractions, parts of a whole can be important.
That's right. That's very true.
But the international experience helped me work with different cultures. The racial lines, the black-white situation, God has somehow has blessed me to allow me to navigate that without any larger confrontations. If we're on a team together, I will make some accommodations, and I'll try to win you. I'll try to win you and earn your support, and hope that you would be trusting to give me your support. I had the occasion with softball. Goddard is NASA's one of the preferred government organizations for people to work for. And we have some social activities. We have softball. I was blessed to earn the Hall of Fame honor in slow pitch softball. We have a variety of clubs. If there's interest, you can start clubs. I was in a Bible club. I played volleyball for a time. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of activities. But softball gave me a chance. Once the fellows knew that I was good, and I was the only minority on the team.
Right.
Well, in 3 years, they wanted me to be the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And the team was made up of, say, my section head,
Mm-hmm.
my branch head, two superiors. So can you imagine James Jackson in 1972 going up to your boss and saying, we're going to make a change. Big boss. So we're going to make a change. We're going to bring in his subordinate to relieve you because they're knocking you around. But that went smoothly because I had earned their respect.
Yep.
On the softball field, gave me a chance to move into management. So when I felt the time had come for me to try managing and being a supervisor, positionally, I was an okay person with them. So I've been blessed to be able to navigate through some rough channels where other people, would have negative situations.
Yeah.
God has blessed me. And I tell people that, my dad used to tell me that in the religious sense, if he were asked questions that men and women in general couldn't answer, they asked him, how did he get that answer? He would say, the Holy Spirit of God gave me that answer.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that through the years to take me through some rough times.
Yep.
I counted 14 doctors that I see every year now to keep me where I am.
Yeah.
With God's help. So God has been part of that. I've tried to do what is godly and what is right, move beyond common sense. I realized that there were times I was called upon to make a decision, and later on I realized I didn't make the best decision. So I've tried to position myself so that God would help me make the right decision the first time through.
There you go. Well, I was going to ask you, as my last question, what you want people to know about your life and experiences, but I kind of feel like you've really sort of laid that out over the last little bit here in the sense of, doing the right thing, doing the best that you can. Whether I still think that your contrast between, a task on the farm or a task with that algorithm, and how essentially at its most basic level, they were the same sort of task. You have something in front of you, you've got to figure out how to get it done. I just find that extremely interesting in general. But let me ask you the question then. What would you want people to know about your life and your experiences?
This is how I summarized it at the end of my Bravo speech. I tried to put it in a few words. A white mother in New Jersey approached me virtually and said, Mr. James, my tutor students call me Mr. James. Said, Mr. James, my daughter does not want a tutor, but I want you to tutor my daughter. And I engaged the mother in a little conversation to find out what kind of things her daughter was interested in. And I found that one of the things she liked to do was she played fast pitch softball, one of the girls' sports. And she was a pitcher and a shortstop. And I felt like the mother had just put the four aces in the deck in my hand to play this game, because I had heard enough to make me believe that I could help her daughter be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Her daughter was willing to put in the work.
Yep.
And when the end of the semester came, the mother wrote me a letter, said, Mr. James, I'm asking all my tutors to give me a statement that I can put in my daughter's journal. And my words were something like this: in math, keep the system balanced. And in particular was algebra. In algebra 1, keep the system balanced. In sports, try to keep the opponent off balance. Strive to be godly and honorable. Then you will do the best that you can do.
Mm.
And that's what I tried to do. Try to analyze the situation. I'm very analytical.
Mm-hmm.
My doctors are operating on me, and I'm asking them questions. So try to understand the situation, what you need to do, and and try to gather the resources that you need, put them together properly, and go and do the best you can. It might not always come out to be the best because we're not perfect, but if you try to do what is right and you try to be honorable, you try to be fair, then you'll work out okay. And that's and God, God is with me. I try to position myself so that God is in me through the Holy Spirit, but I can be contrary and not allow Him to help me. So I try to position myself emotionally, mentally, to let God guide me the way He would want me to go.
There you
go. I don't know how that's coming out, but that's what I'm trying to do.
I think that's a great answer.
I'm currently studying the names of God.
There you go.
Their meaning and how it can apply to my life and how I can use it to help other people.
There you go.
I'm not a preacher. I said I would. Two things I said I would never do as a youth. One was to sell items. I end up selling shoes at Tall Hammers on West Broad Street. and I'm not a preacher. Still not a preacher.
Yep. Well, but you know what you do have is you have this nice mix between a man of science and a man of faith. And I feel like, like you talked about, that balance is essential. But look, Mr. Jackson, I very much appreciate your time, sir. I very much appreciate you coming on the program. Obviously, as somebody from Chesterfield, a Bravo Award winner, even if you didn't have all the experiences that you have, that would be one thing. But you have such a wealth of them, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking a little bit about it. Thank you very much for your time. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you and your organization for having me.
Now, make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia, all one word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Make sure to like that page so you can keep up with us and go forward. Now, let me tell you about all the ways you can check us out. You can watch us on our YouTube channel, as well as on our website at Chesterfield.gov/podcast. An audio-only version of the show is available there, as well as on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and a whole host of other services. You can also watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7 and on the weekends at noon. That's Comcast Channel 98 and Verizon Channel 28. Lastly, you can check out Chesterfield.gov/connect with us for more ways to get in touch with us and for us to get in touch with you. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, our executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the crew here from Communications and Media. Thank you very much for all that you do. And thank you very much to all of you out there for joining us today. So, from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care.